Hi, welcome to another strategic thinking series. Today we're going to be talking about why vendor management offices need to define a core set of processes. We've spoke about in the past about post-process maturity and how to build quality processes, but we never really touched upon why there's a need to define these core set of processes. And a question came up recently that led to this video to sort of get across why those VMOs, so vendor management office functions, supplier management office functions, should look at building a core set of processes. There's another video you can look for about what those processes are that we recommend, but this one is addressing why is the need.
Vendor Ops, powered by Brooklyn Solutions.
So first off, what's a core set of process fundamental to? So the reason we need to define these core set of processes is mainly consistency. So consistency of approach. Everyone's doing it the same. Everyone's doing it via the same methodology. That means you get this centralized way of then controlling quality. So if you consistently approach something time after time, you then have the ability to baseline against quality, what that quality looks like, and then over time improve that. They're fundamental to outcomes. So if you're looking for a goal, specifically an objective, the reason to define a core process is to then look at working in reverse, really, is look at what you want to achieve from it, what the outcomes of that process need to be, look at that and then build the process based on that backwards to the beginning to lead to that outcome and what you need at the right level of quality, as we said before. It also provides clarity, which then links into the other thing around consistency. It provides clarity of operations different from consistency. Consistency is the same thing over and over again. Clarity is providing those that will use the process an ability to hit consistency, to hit a level of quality, and to hit the outcomes as defined and as required. Also to help with change. If it's documented, if it's consistently done, if there's clarity around how the process is approached, then it's easier to change. You can change it centrally, then cascade that change out, and then the new version or version 1.12 of that process can then be adopted because it's already understood what version 1 looked like. Compliance. So internal compliance, external compliance, regulated industries. Back to the piece around the outcomes, compliance and regulation ask for a specific outcome typically or to address a specific point. So by defining a process, there's a fundamental part that says to achieve compliance, it needs to be done with all the things we've said before, consistently, quality, outcome, clarity, and the ability to change as that regulation changes over time. And the inverse of that, to hit a level of compliance, is then to have it auditable. All the above points again, if we understand where it's done, how it's done, what the outcomes are, the ability to then audit that becomes infinitely easier to do. And then ultimately to reduce risk, right? So reduce risk and the chance of failure. If everyone does something in different ways, how they like to do it, there's a lot more risk involved and there's a lot less assurance on the quality. And thus if the quality is down, then there's an increased risk that that process itself will fail and not deliver the expected outcome. So that's core processes, what they're fundamental to. In terms of what a core, as we call a central or core process should be for a VMO or vendor management office, they should be easy to understand what the expected inputs are. So what do you need to start the process? What do you need to kick it off? What do you need in front of you to be able to complete the process cycle? What are the expected outputs? Similar to the goals and outcomes, but it's the things that come out of the process that lead to the goals and outcomes. What's expected out of the process? What are the individual steps and tasks that need to be taken from getting the inputs to potentially getting more inputs to then getting to the expected outcomes? What are the series of steps that need to be taken? Like a workflow, essentially. Clear goals. So what are the clear goals of the process? When you get to the end of it, make sure you've got an ability to say, well, what was required? What was the outcome meant to be? What was the goal? If there's one of those missed, then go back in the process and look at where that might have been missed. That step might have been not delivered, what was expected. And then you might even identify process improvement opportunities there, right? You've come against completing a process. You've then got a goal defined or a list of goals defined. The process, for whatever reason, didn't achieve that goal. So you go back and look at, well, where did that break down and why didn't you get to that? And then look at improving the process over the time. On to the next topic, which is increasing efficiency and effectiveness. So the reason you want to document or at least create these core set of processes is one of the main reasons is increasing the efficiency and effectiveness of the organisation, the people that work within it. Ways of doing that are to simplify it, so to make sure it's not overly bureaucratic, too many steps, that you lean it out as much as possible. And the word lean here applies to lean manufacturing as well, and you can look at that as a discipline as how to improve your process and how to lean that out. And streamlining processes are looking at how you take out waste. And there's a number of types of waste that come from raw materials and where they're located, to failure rates, to situating transport around certain things. And I know in most office environments you kind of think, oh, transport doesn't apply to me in logistics, but it might do if you look at the inputs you require and where you need to go and get that. Even in the digital sense, if that's bureaucratic and complicated to get that digital input, you can still apply sort of lean manufacturing methodology and waste. There's 7 types of waste that you can look at that give you a thought process as to how you can improve that end-to-end flow each time. Outcome focused, so make sure you are relentlessly focused on the outcome for that process. Don't include in there things that are going to over processing, etc., or too much time spent on nice to haves when you're just focused on what that process needs to deliver, and make it as efficient as it can to deliver those things. Make it measurable. You can't measure it, you don't know how to improve it. So at least define a level of KPI, be it based on time or output of quality, quantity, depending on that process, set of KPIs, set of key risk indicators, set of key control indicators, and then over time look at how you would improve that month on month, quarter on quarter, year on year, and look at how that process is performing better and better in the organisation. And then, similarly to what I just said, define benchmarking. So what is equivalently against that process type? What do you consider to be a bad, okay, and a good cycle? And then potentially report on that for each time it happens and look at seeing how you're performing in the field. You can have an excellently designed process like on paper and theory, but when it comes to executing at scale, there might be something wrong with it, too overly complex, not the right tools, not the right level of documentation. You need to look at where the average is performing by a defined kind of benchmarking across your organisation. That process has been performed 100 times. How did it perform on average each time? And is that in line with the expected tolerance of your process design, etc.? How do we help with orders and sequencing, etc.? In this case, you've got structured steps. So make sure the process has got easy to consume, easy to understand, not overly verbose or bureaucratic single steps in it. If it's like a few steps in the process, and people might go, well, there's only a few steps and it's easy. But if those steps are really complex, really detailed, really hard to get through, there's a chance that the process won't be completed. So break it down into small, manageable chunks and structured steps. Document that order. Make sure that there is a implementation advice against the workflow, against sort of key points of it or key points where it can break and deviate and the reasons it can deviate. Make sure that implementation advice is there against that workflow. Provide templates and checklists that can be populated. Templates and checklists are a really easy way to make sure that you're getting the right level of quantity and the operators are following that process as it's been designed and how it's been designed. And also on the back end of that, provide examples, because the examples really help with the quality bar. So you have a template which is typically blank. There's a series of boxes or steps that you kind of check as you go along, but that doesn't ever give you any kind of level of quality and how much someone should put into each step. So someone might write a sentence against that part of the template when you might want a paragraph. If you provide an example, you can say, look, this is the ideal amount of text you need to write or feedback or update on for this part of the process. And if you do that, the quality will be a lot better. Regulation and compliance. A lot of these processes I need either, like I said before, for internal compliance to internal policy and internal ways of working, or in some cases, in some industries, external regulatory compliance needs to demonstrate because that's been set by an external regulator. I'm going to repeat a little bit here, but these are the key points of why you'd define these core processes, because if they are a process that is driving compliance, especially against regulation, they need to be consistent and they need to be performed consistently for you to have a chance of reporting a level of compliance. They need to be repeatable, so they need to be able to be scaled out and repeatable across your organisations, not done in a consistent way, but repeatably done by a different set of operators each time. They need to be evidence-based, so as you're completing the process in a repeatable and consistent way, you're amassing evidence as you go. That's back to the templates, back to the examples, and then that evidence then becomes auditable and is stored in an easy-to-find location. If a regulator comes in and says, I want to see X, show me your core processes. Are you giving your core processes? Show me the list of suppliers or vendors you manage, you give them that. Typical approach for a regulator will be, show me that supplier going through that process, and they might do that 10 or 20 times to spot check the quality of the controls you've got. So you need that to be auditable. You need that to be in a centralized location. So you need to be able to say that supplier and find where it went through that process and at what time, and the documentation, the evidence trail behind that. You will need digital support in some shape or form to do that in a scalable manner. So at scale and at volume, you'll need some digital platform help to do that. And ultimately what this is gearing up to is something that I'm aware of the regulators use as a term that I've been familiar with for sort of 10, 15 years, is that you can demonstrate reasonable steps. Regulation and compliance isn't there to stop things going wrong ever. It's to mitigate the chances of things going wrong and to make sure that things are being performed to a reasonable standard. And thus you can demonstrate you've taken reasonable steps in line and in the spirit of the regulation. You'll be able to have a good conversation with the regulator. If you can't demonstrate reasonable steps, that's when it's a problem. And it's not about it going right or wrong. Things can go wrong even when you've taken reasonable steps. So the regulator won't necessarily come in and look at the fact something's gone wrong and say, right, you're automatically guilty because something went wrong. They'll look at how you approached it and if you took reasonable steps. And if you did take reasonable steps, they can sometimes just go, it's just one of those things. We could tighten it up here and there, etc. But ultimately, you was in line with the spirit of the regulation. Unavoidable circumstance, essentially. So I hope that was useful. They are the reasons why the Vendor Management Office needs to define a core set of processes. You can look out for other videos what we think some of those core processes are, and we go through each one of them. Hope that was useful. Thank you. Feedback, comments, welcome. Thank you. Bye-bye.
Vendor Ops, powered by Brooklyn Solutions. To keep up with the latest Vendor Ops news, subscribe here and follow us on LinkedIn, Facebook and Twitter. Links in the description below.